priority list heading into this one. Like if I had, pulled Vasily Podkolzin aside before the hockey game and said, Vasily, what are your thoughts going into this? And he would tell me that, we got to get home ice in round 3. A lot has to happen for these two teams to meet in the third round. And if they do, yes, it would start in Winnipeg, despite the Canucks winning their division. But man, if the Canucks get to round 3 in these playoffs, the season has already been a success. And if they get that far, they're playing well both home and away in all likelihood. So that's a couple of bridges down the road. We'll get around to talking about Nashville. We knew last night that was the matchup, and now the opener has been set for 7 o'clock on Sunday, so the countdown is on to the return of playoff hockey here in Vancouver and at Rogers Arena. But yes, there was the matter of this game and, coaches' decisions. Obviously, we knew earlier in the day, no JT Miller. We knew last night, in fact, that Brock Boeser had been left behind. So obviously he wasn't a candidate to play in this hockey game. And then Rick Tocchet decided to sit a couple of veterans, Ian Cole, the graybeard on this team at 35, a little bit of load management for him. And Filip Hronek misses his first game of the season for the Vancouver Canucks, so got to 81, but they choose to sit him down. I think he's playing through some sort of arm injury, and he's played 81 games, but rest obviously best at this stage. So Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson were the stars in the Vancouver Canucks lineup. Quinn Hughes gets an assist, so runs his incredible season total to 92, and that's where he finishes. And this was a team that for a quarter century didn't have a 50-point defenseman, and that's all Quinn Hughes has done is rack up points and keep setting his own records. And 92 points. We'll see if he can raise the bar next season and beyond. But what a year for Quinn Hughes. Gets the assist on the Elias Lindholm power play goal in that second period.
Well, and Quinn Hughes playing 22-38 in this game. I think that surprised me. I thought he'd be sitting around 15 minutes. And, certainly he played as well as you would have expected. He didn't necessarily try to engage as much in certain areas of the game. But, before we get into that, let's talk about the decisions to sit guys. And like you said, Filip Hronek potentially playing through something. I think we've both speculated that for a while. We don't know it for sure, but we do see a player with a big-time shot that's been shooting very little. And there's been some moments, the last broadcast we did where you kind of saw a play against the wall where it didn't look like Hronek wanted to be there first and potentially have to take a hit to make a play. So there's been a few of those types of things. So when you look at a player like that getting sat, okay, we look at that. Ian Cole, I thought maybe you want to sit Quinn Hughes, but maybe that was a bridge too far that they didn't want to get to. So you go with Cole, who's certainly the elder statesman on the back end for Vancouver. But then, we'd been debating back and forth since the All-Star break about Elias Pettersson, and is there something there? And yet JT Miller gets sat down instead of Pettersson. So do we take anything from that? Certainly Miller doesn't look like he's playing through anything, but it might indicate that Petey isn't either, because there was a time a couple of weeks ago where he did get some maintenance days, not as much lately. Those have been going to Brock Boeser. But, and certainly from a Canucks standpoint, if there's a forward you can ill afford to lose, it's JT Miller, more so than Pettersson, the way Miller's been playing. But is there anything else in your mind, if even those things, to be read into tonight's deployment?
No, I mean, I think that they wanted to get Elias Pettersson going, and yet this wasn't the kind of game that I'm not going to cast any kind of judgment on any of the individuals.
You can't say this isn't the kind of game. I mean, if this is a Winnipeg team that was also kind of half in, maybe this is the game for Pettersson. And there were some moments where they generated pressure, but I'm still seeing a player that maybe doesn't drive play as much, and a player that seems a little easy to move off the puck, right, at various times. And this was a game, in my estimation, that you could have tried to get him going a little bit, and his line didn't change. Whereas you look at Pius Suter, and he goes from JT Miller and Brock Boeser to having to play with PDG and Nils Oman.
Yeah. Fair enough, and we'll stand it for a little bit. Would you love Pettersson to take over a game? Sure, but we've been saying that for the last 25 games. I guess I came into this one with limited expectations, just knowing that there wasn't going to be the intensity that, again, if players, I do think first and foremost, their priority was getting out of this thing alive. And there was a moment there in the third period where it looked like Pettersson was shaking out his leg a little bit. I don't know if he got tangled up with a Winnipeg player, whatever the case. I think he is fine. And, the judgment really begins for him on Sunday at 7 o'clock. And it wasn't a great final stretch of the regular season for Elias Pettersson. We know that there's a better player in there, and we'll see when the lights are brightest and the stakes go up. What does he do and what does he bring to the mix for the Vancouver Canucks? Conor Garland played hard, no surprise, has been one of the best Canucks and best play drivers on this hockey club, really for the second half of the season. And, good for him. Had the hat trick on the final night of the regular season last year, including the winner in overtime against his old team, the Arizona Coyotes. Had come up short of the 20-goal mark in each of his first 2 seasons as a member of the Vancouver Canucks. And whether he got to 20 or not, he's changed the narrative around him this season, has become a really valuable piece for this hockey club. But I think there is something for these guys individually to reach the kind of milestones that Garland did. He was rewarded with the hard play here, got a fortunate bounce off his shin pads, but gets to the 20-goal mark for the second time in his career, but the first time in Canuck colors.
Yeah, and I think that was something a lot of people wanted to see. We look at statistical milestones this team has achieved, in recent games. You had the big game where Brock got to 40 and JT got to 100 points. And, every game it seems like Quinn Hughes is breaking some statistical milestone, and we'll see if he can hang on to the defenseman scoring lead. But yeah, I mean, Conor Garland has been a really good player for this team from start to finish, right? And, he deserved 20 goals. To me, like, it looked like he's been on more than that. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that he's only at 20, and that's not a criticism of him, but just to tell you how noticeable he has been, I'm surprised we're still waiting on 20 because he's impacted the game much more than that. So good for him to get to 20. Dakota Joshua fell a little short, but, he's a player that had to deal with 6 weeks of injury. So you kind of view that one a little bit differently because had he been healthy, he would have hit that. But, Höglander got to 20 earlier. So I think it's a positive thing, and I'm sure something that Garland's going to be happy about because we've talked about it before, right? I mean, think of where he was at the beginning of the year where he changed agents. His agent was given permission to look at a trade. And we're not suggesting he asked for a trade, although some have, but certainly he was open to it at that time. And now the best thing for him, much like Brock Besser said at the end of last year, was the best thing was not having a trade, right? So, and I've maintained for a while that for all the credit Alvin and Rutherford get for fixing the cap, biggest thing that fixed the cap was that Besser and Garland are now on efficient deals. Nobody looks at their number anymore and says, oh my God, if that money could be spent better. They have earned every penny with how well they've played this year.
Well, for the last couple of games, Garland's found himself on a line with Dakota Joshua and Elias Lindholm in the middle. And first and foremost was getting Lindholm healthy, and he missed the stretch of games there with the wrist injury, but he's been back for a week now. Again, the offense has been slow to flow, but nice hand-eye coordination. And remember, his first game as a Vancouver Canuck in Carolina out of the All-Star break scored a pair of power play goals with a couple of nifty tips. So, if he can feel good about himself in any way going to the playoffs, we'll see. And we'll talk more about the matchup with the Nashville Predators. But depth obviously looks like it's an advantage to the Vancouver Canucks, and Lindholm in that line should play a pivotal role in all of that. So Elias Lindholm gets to 15 goals on the season. I thought he had an assist on the Garland goal. They took it away. It's Garland unassisted to open the scoring 5.5 minutes into the hockey game. But, for Lindholm, it goes beyond the offensive numbers, obviously. This is a guy that went 10-7 on the faceoffs in this hockey game. And you want to see that from him. Almost 4 minutes of shorthanded ice time on another night where, and look, most of the Jets' top-end guys, certainly the top of their power play, out of the lineup with Scheifele and Kyle Connor and Josh Morrissey. But, the Canucks penalty kill goes 4 for 4 on the night, and Elias Lindholm a big part of that. So individually, small steps forward, I think, for Elias Lindholm here to try to get his game ready to level up here come playoff time.
Yeah, and we've got a group chat, and one of the members of it suggested that is it weird that, how that hasn't necessarily been a fit yet? And I'm not sure I totally agree, because I think the difference is when Teddy Bluger played with Conor Garland and Dakota Joshua, he was also a grinder, and he was trying to facilitate. Whereas you look at it now, and that's not necessarily Lindholm's game. So there are times where the other two are trying to facilitate him, and drive play to him. But for me, I just like the way he's been skating. I like his engagement level. I do believe he's been a different player coming out of the injury, right? And I do think that eventually that third line is going to be a fit. And I think Pius Suter has looked better playing alongside of Miller and Besser. I think that's going to be fine. Can they get some consistency out of the Pettersson line? They had some pretty good shifts today, some productive shifts, some heavy offensive zone time shifts. And if they can do that, I do think this third line is going to do its part with Lindholm. And the fact that he was able to get that goal, I think is going to be a positive, right? I mean, he needs some mojo to get him going a little bit. And, they are going to control play. That line is going to control play, and we'll see whether Lindholm's going to set plays up or whether he's going to finish plays, but he's going to get opportunities to do both as this team gets into the playoffs.
We're here breaking down this game. We want to hear from you. Love your interaction here on Rink Wide Vancouver. You can join us on any of our social channels. We've got them on the screen for those that you are that are watching, and we would love to incorporate some of your feedback, your thoughts on this game. If you have thoughts on this game, the end of the regular season, and of course, what is to come. And that's the playoffs that start on Sunday for the Vancouver Canucks. Still don't know the full schedule at this point, but game one, 7 p.m. Pacific time against the Nashville Predators on Sunday night at Rogers Arena. All right, maybe the most important player for the Vancouver Canucks, in the non-Quinn Hughes category, is Thatcher Demko. And the fact that he got back and looked really good the other night, facing 40 shots against the Calgary Flames. Workload was limited, but he gets through this game. He stayed in for all 3 periods. Rick Tocchet had kind of joked yesterday that if this turned into shinny and the game was getting a little squirrely, he wasn't going to waste any time getting Demko out of there because there wasn't a whole lot of value for him. But, for Thatcher Demko, it's all about timing and still trying to get those rhythms and patterns down. And I know he gives up 3, but I thought there were some moments where, again, he looks like he's finding his form. And a week ago, we weren't convinced. The Canucks told us they had a plan, and sure enough, they get Demko back for a couple of games. What did you make of his night, and where do you think he is in terms of his playoff readiness?
I thought he was really good tonight, and I don't know that you can fault him on any of those goals. It started right away. There was a bit of a miscue, behind their own net, led to an early scoring chance, 17 seconds in.
Yeah,
he
Monahan
stopped that. Yeah, the Monahan one, and made a great save a little bit later on. The Canucks were defending with 3. Remember on the penalty kill after Friedman blocked that shot, and he made a few saves there, at some key moments. And I just think his reads were really good. He was able to anticipate plays. There was a really good scoring chance Mason Appleton had, and he got across and made the play. So I think those were some of the things. We talked to Thatcher Demko about this earlier in the week. And do you want to play in this game, especially if some key players are sitting out? And he wanted to play because he knew there were a few things he needed to work on. And if, lateral reads and things like that were part of that, I think he answered those questions. So I think he's going into the playoffs with a pretty good level. There was the one mistake behind the net where I think he and Juleson weren't necessarily on the same page. They lose control of the puck and eventually it ends up in Vancouver's net. I think that was the game-winning goal. But overall, I think they're much farther ahead in goal than they were with Casey DeSmith and Archer's Shilovs. And I know that's an obvious statement, but even if Demko is right now at 90 or 95%, that still puts them in a pretty good position heading into Sunday.
Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable after watching them for 2 games. Saw them with my own eyes the other night against Calgary. Watched this one on television, but I'm with you. Like I think 2 games and kind of treat it like an NHL preseason to a degree. And we know how good he was, certainly out of the gates this season for the Vancouver Canucks. And so, whatever concerns, in my mind, it's not my mind that matters most. It's his and his teammates. But I thought he looked pretty sharp, and he'll be ready to go come Sunday night.
Well, 2 things for me. Number one, there is no sign of the injury, right? Like he doesn't look slower, in any of his movements. And having asked him about it, that, I know you're working on timing things, but, coming out of the last game, does the injury impact you at all? Absolutely not. So that's number one. Number 2 is he's not made any modifications to what he's doing because of the injury, right? Compensatory movements. And that was a problem for him last year because when he came into the season coming off an injury, he wasn't confident, he wasn't comfortable, and he made some modifications, and that led to a compensatory injury. And talking to Kevin Woodley, who certainly knows this player a lot more than I do in terms of how he makes specific saves and specific movement patterns, he has shown none of that. So as long as he's playing the game the way he's most comfortable playing the game, it's all going to be there on Sunday.
Stops 22 of 25. They get the empty netter at the end, Perfetti. And we talked about the penalty kill. Goalie's got to be your best penalty killer. The Jets had 9 power play shots and didn't score on them. So that's when he was busiest. And he did seem to have Sean Monahan's number. There was the chance early in the hockey game that you alluded to. There was another one on the 2-on-1 when Monahan held on, had Toffoli go into the net, and Monahan missed the net, but clearly didn't have a whole lot to shoot out there because Thatcher Demko standing tall in goal and doing his thing. And so this is it. Rehearsal is over. He's back, and we'll see. It should be a great goaltending matchup. Again, we'll talk more about the playoffs and the Predators coming up here. A couple of other things from this hockey game. Nikita Zadorov was into it for, we talk about intensity. He had 4 hits, and 2 of them were big ones to the point that Gabe Vilardi had sort of seen enough and just wanted to settle things down, although he wound up on the short end of the body slam there from Nikita Zadorov. But there's no question that Big Z or Big Zed is going to be an X factor for the Vancouver Canucks come playoff time when things ramp up physically. And so, credit to him. Like, that's how he has to play. And, he wasn't going to take the night off here.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I absolutely despise about the NHL is retribution for clean hits. And if you look at both of Zadorov's hits, elbows are down. He's not leaving his feet. Not that at 6'7" he needs to leave his feet, but he laid two guys out. Why does he have to answer for that? I don't get it. He answered, I guess he finished the fight on top of the pile, I guess. So, yay, he won the fight. But, look, he knows how to play one way. And the one good thing about it is that way is playoff way. So I think he's going to really have a big imprint in that series. And if you're the Nashville Predators, you're going to be keeping an eye on where Nikita Zadorov is, because he's just that kind of player, right? And the coach has got confidence in him. And when he gets an opportunity to lay you out, he's going to lay you out, and he's going to do it cleanly. And let's see if Nashville tries to fight him. Fortunately, it's the playoffs, so we see very little of that. But he's a player that allows everybody around him to be that much more confident in what they're doing.
Well, I hope the Canucks got their too many men on the ice penalties out of the way here with a pair on this hockey game. If Rick Tocchet had hair to pull out, he might. Again, I don't think he's going to fret the fact that they end up losing the regular season finale, but perhaps it was confusion and different line mates, whatever the case. One too many men on the ice penalty, not ideal. Two in the same game, not great for the Vancouver Canucks, but they were able to kill off all four of the Winnipeg power plays. 4-2 is the final. The Canucks finish this regular season 50 wins, 23 outright losses, and 9 overtime or shootout losses. That's 109 points, third best record in franchise history. And again, who saw that coming at the outset of the season? And just file this away because the playoffs are going to start in Vancouver. But, they were great at on home ice, but good teams are good both home and away, Farhan. And the Canucks went 23-14-4 out on the road, and 2 wins in Nashville included in that total of 23 victories on the season. So, they should feel good when the series shifts, but they played all season for home ice advantage, and they're going to try to make the most of that starting on Sunday. This is Rink Wide Vancouver. It's a presentation of the Applewood Auto Group, and right now at Infinity Langley, they can hook you up with a 2024 QX60. You can lease it at 0.99%, up to 24 months on all trim. Remember, it's all good at Applewood. All right, I just gave the regular season record there. Want to just step back and take a look at the season as a whole here before we start to preview the playoffs, and we'll get to our features. We'll get to the 3 stars and the stat that stands out, and we'll check in on some listener feedback as well. And of course, Rink Wide Worldwide with a twist tonight. So you're going to want to stick around for that. Pretty exciting news, actually, for us and hopefully for you, the listeners and the viewers as well. But when you look at this regular season, JT Miller doesn't play tonight, so he can't add to his point totals. Got to 100 and then some. Finishes the year with 103 points to lead all Vancouver Canucks scorers. Brock Besser, who sat out, and again, has been nursing something. And I think we know that with all the maintenance days that he's had of late. So prudent play there just to leave him behind and make sure that he's as ready to go as he can be for the start of the playoffs, because they're going to need him. Besser leads this team with 40 goals on the season. Quinn Hughes, an amazing season, 17 goals, 75 assists for Farhan, 92 points for the captain. And Elias Pettersson didn't figure in the scoring, despite the close call there late in the third period trying to tie it. 34 goals, 55 assists, 89 points, down from his 102. And he was on that pace up until the All-Star break. But these final 25, a little quieter than I think everybody would have liked for EP40. But still, 89 points as a guy that's 25 years of age. So, productive to a point. But, there's going to be pressure on him to perform here starting on Sunday. But what do we make of just the individual seasons of all of those top-end Vancouver Canucks?
Well, I think it goes back to what Jim Rutherford said at the start of the season, right? That a lot of things needed to go right for this team to get into the playoffs, and a lot went right and then some. And you talk about players having career years, and I don't know that they necessarily all had them, Quinn Hughes notwithstanding, but they all played at top level. Maybe not Pettersson, but certainly JT Miller, after sitting on 99 points the other year, getting his big contract. And we knew that he didn't have to hit 100 all the time for him to justify that deal, but he did, right? And he played at such a high level. So many of their players played exceptionally well, right? I mean, we talked about Conor Garland, getting to 20 goals this year. Brock Besser getting to 40. We had, you kept asking him every training camp, is this year you're going to get to 30? Well, he got to 40. Dakota Joshua with another big year. Philip Roenick doing some great things in the first half of the season. And I think the other thing that was really important, and for me, this is why I kind of went back and forth on what the Canucks needed to do at the deadline, because people say, you know, don't sacrifice future assets and really gut your system. And I get that. And I'm generally someone who leans that way, but I also don't think you're always going to be in position to have as many things go right as this Canucks team had this year. And they were incredibly healthy. You know, when you look at their top 6 or 7 scores, they all played virtually every game. Thatcher Demko had a 5-week injury, no doubt, right? Dakota Joshua had a 6-week injury. But beyond that, I mean, you know, for the most part, and by the time Demko got hurt, the playoffs were a formality at that point. They weren't missing the playoffs. So Demko was there during all that heavy lifting that needed to be required. So I just think so much went right for this team. And even when the PDO was out of control before the All-Star break and we knew it was going to regress, it didn't fall off a cliff. It just got to a point where they were still able to tread water. You put out the stat the other day that when you break this season down in 20-game increments, just how consistent this team was. You know, early in the year when they stubbed their toe, it was win-loss, win-loss, win-loss. Then they stubbed their toe and had like a 4 or 5 game losing streak, but then they win the next 4. You know, and even here at the end of the year, right? They coming into this game, they'd gone 3-0-1 in their last 4 games. So there's a lot that has gone right. The consistency has been there. So you know, it's hard to pinpoint one thing, but maybe consistency is the word, right? That while a lot of things went right for key players, they just consistently played one way from start to finish.
Yeah, and I think it's important, too, to note that while the power play was lights out good for the first, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of the season, you know, humming along 30% or better, in the second half, there was a slowdown on the power play, and yet there wasn't a huge slowdown in JT Miller's production or Quinn Hughes. Only as Pettersson had a little bit of a drop-off in the second half compared to the first, but, you know, a lot of 5-on-5 scoring, and we'll see if that serves the Canucks well. You know, there will be some penalties maybe early in the series as referees try to establish control and set some guidelines. But it seems the deeper series go and the later you go in playoffs, the whistles go away and you have to win games at 5-on-5. And I think the Canucks feel pretty confident that they'll have enough success to do that as they take on the Nashville Predators. Filip Hronek finished at 48 points. Certainly was on pace for 50+. His production did slow. We talked about the fact that maybe there's an injury that's hampering him a little bit. Whatever the case, still, career year for Filip Hronek. Obviously, a contract year. We spent a lot of time talking about that, and we'll see how all that plays out. That's on the back burner for Hronek, but I do want to talk about news of the day here because I didn't see this one coming. That as the Canucks were taking the ice for the morning skate in Winnipeg, news drops that Vasily Podkolzin signs a 2-year extension. Was going to be an RFA. Didn't have much leverage because he spent most of the year in the American Hockey League, and in his time here. Certainly hasn't been any kind of bottom line numbers for him, but has played his way into, I think, one of the 12 guys that will start in the playoffs on Sunday. We'll find out. But, you know, an affordable ticket, obviously, at $1 million for each of the next couple of seasons. And so there's potential here for this to be a value deal for the Vancouver Canucks. They're hoping that Podkolzin follows the Nils Höglander plan, and we know what the year in Abbotsford did for Höglander, who finishes with 24 goals this year and is part of the top 6 on this hockey club. But Vasily Podkolzin, 2 years, $2 million total, so $1 million per. Is there going to be more from Vasily Podkolzin over the balance of this contract?
Yeah, I think there will be. I do think there's more there. I think he plays the game the right way. He brings a physical dimension to the game. And, you know, you want him to be more than a fourth-line player. To me, he absolutely should be one of the Canucks' 12 forwards. But big picture, looking ahead to next year, he is their 12th forward. So there's going to be people trying to push him down farther in the lineup, depending on who gets signed. But, you know, they are going to try to make moves to improve, and it's going to be up to him to earn his spot. And there is going to need to be a bit of an offensive bottom line. And he's had chances at various years. I mean, a couple of years ago when he was a full-time NHLer, he was able to produce more offensively. Maybe he hasn't been put in those top 6 or even middle 6 roles on a regular basis. But I think if he gets more of an opportunity going forward, I think he'll be able to live up to that. You know, and the one thing with him is that I think when you watch him play, I think he does the things that Rick Tocchet appreciates, right? Where there was maybe a time when they first moved him down that he didn't know how to play in his own end of the ice. He didn't understand what his role was and how to simplify his game. And there were times when he did too much. So I think this has the potential to be a value deal for this team. And yeah, it could be Nils Höglander a year from now. Maybe he doesn't get 20 goals, but maybe he gets 15 and finds something above what he did last year, just depending on the number of games and minutes he winds up playing.
14 goals, 26 points as a rookie. He played 79 games in that rookie season. Yeah. And I saw people on social pointing out, you know, he played higher in the lineup and was given lots of opportunities on a bad team that wasn't playing for anything. And you'd hope that that was going to be the jumping on point. Obviously, there has been some ebbs and flows, more ebbs than flows, I suppose, for Podkolzin. And now as the stakes matter and this team gets better, as you said, around him, it's harder to find those opportunities. I remember on his draft year, and I keep coming back to the fact that he was a 10th overall pick, and at some point, maybe I just got to park that. He is who he is. He's going to be 23 here in June, so 5 years removed from his draft year. But a lot of the talk in the draft was, okay, this guy might not have this massive offensive ceiling, but he's got playmaking ability, two-way versatility and value, and he's going to become a penalty killer. We haven't seen any of that, and I do wonder if that's an area at some point that they can task him with, penalty killing. A lot of it's read and reaction and just the work ethic, and certainly the work ethic is there for this guy. I'm curious to see if they are able to find more of a role to help him sort of flesh out his game if the offense isn't going to be there and he doesn't project to play a little bit higher in the lineup as time marches on.
Yeah, no, I think they will, because we talked last off season about Dakota Joshua and how to find more value. And listen, this guy needs to learn how to kill penalties. And guess what? He made that a part of what he was able to offer this year. And I think the exact same thing is going to happen with Nils Höglander or with Vasily Podkolzin, because you're right. You can't just live in that bottom six role without bringing a little more to the table. And I think he has that. When you look at how he plays the game, you'd think it would lend itself to penalty killing, right? And he'll be at the point next year where he'll have enough experience and have an idea of what that looks like. But yeah, you want to take more pressure off your top guys and you want to get them out there. So I do fully expect that, much like Dakota Joshua coming into this year. I think that could be a big part of Podkolzin's game next year.
Anif in the inbox says, Pods has shown he's worth that. No glaring mistakes and an absolute grinder. Definitely worth just above league minimum. And that's it. I mean, there isn't a whole lot of risk here for the Vancouver Canucks. 2 years at $1 million per, just a shade above league minimum. And you do hope
you can bury him if you need to, which you hope you don't. But
he's
it's
motivated.
A deal.
He's a young guy. He's got a young family now. I know he wants it to work for him, but certainly there were higher expectations for a 10th overall pick in the National Hockey League draft. All right, want to get to the 3 stars here, the Rink Wide Vancouver 3-star selection. We always like to see who was selected as the stars of the game in the building, and the 3 stars were Nikita Chibarkov, who scored the game winner, his first NHL goal, Brad Lambert and Cole Perfetti. So local media in Winnipeg, giving the guys making their NHL debuts a little bit of love there. We'll go slightly differently, as you can see on our screen here. Cole Perfetti is the first star of the hockey game. He had the goal that put the Jets in front at 2-1 early in that second period, the snapshot off the rush, and then sealed the deal into the empty net. So a 2-goal night for Cole Perfetti. 2-point night for Conor Garland. The engine just keeps on running, the 20th goal of the season. We talked about him at length earlier. And Laurent Brossoit, who has been terrific for the Winnipeg Jets, and ends up getting the victory here. But what a 1-2 punch. They're able to give Connor Hellebuyck the night off. But Brossoit, when he's been asked to step in and play for the Jets, has been terrific, and again made some saves without his stick. I mean, that was a crazy sequence. We talked about Pettersson, but Suter had a couple of opportunities. I thought the tying goal was there. I thought the Canucks somehow were going to squeeze it in, but Brossoit able to make the saves and keep the puck out. That's his job ultimately. So those are the Rink Wide Vancouver 3 stars: Cole Perfetti, Conor Garland, and Laurent Brossoit. The 3 stars are brought to you by Greta Bar, YVR, Canucks Army home for food, drinks, and watching the game. And speaking of which, look for and listen for details of the Canucks Army playoff watch parties that are coming for road games throughout the postseason. We'll have more details on that in the days ahead. But if you're looking for a place to watch Canucks playoff hockey, Greta Bar, YVR, we certainly recommend that. Jeff and Farhan with you here, breaking down a 4-2 Winnipeg victory over the Vancouver Canucks. I think enough said about the game itself. The countdown is on to 7 o'clock Sunday and beyond as the Vancouver Canucks are going to open up the Stanley Cup playoffs at home against the Nashville Predators. We will talk more about that, preview that. We'll have our staff that stands out, a little bit more listener feedback, and we'll check in on our map as well. You got a little preview of it there, a sneak peek at our map as we go rink wide, worldwide with a twist, as I mentioned. We've got an announcement to make about our plans here for some playoff coverage. You are watching and listening to Rink Wide Vancouver. It's brought to you by Applewood Auto Group. And we are back on Rink Wide Vancouver 4-2. The Winnipeg Jets defeat the Vancouver Canucks. This segment of the program, a presentation of the Vancouver Canadians. Yeah, the boys of spring and summer are back out at the net. You can catch fireworks, giveaways, Friday nooners, superstar appearances all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at canadiansbaseball.com. The Seas open up a new homestand on Tuesday, April 23rd. Don't miss the nooner at the net on Friday the 26th. Their Family Fun Sunday on the 28th. For tickets, call 604-872-5232 or check them out online, canadiansbaseball.com. All right, Farhan, I think we'll leave the Jets game in the past. The Vancouver Canucks, again, this was all about survival. They did that and make their way home. Rick Tocchet said as much after the morning skate when he was, what are you looking to get out of this thing? He's like, yeah, we'll play 3 periods and just get on the jet and get out of here. Now he and his coaching staff, quick turnaround. We wondered when the playoffs were going to start, and we found out from Sportsnet during the broadcast that, 7 o'clock is the start time for the first game. Still waiting the full schedule of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and that'll be out at the conclusion of play on the final night of the regular season. But we'll get to that in a second. I said we were going to leave the game behind, but we had to have a stat that stands out. So I want to get to that. And you can see it on our screen. Conor Garland opens the scoring, his 20th goal of the year, 5:22 of the first period. 53rd time in 82 games that the Vancouver Canucks opened the scoring. And when they did, and they lost this hockey game ultimately, but 38-11-4 when they opened the scoring. And look, Nashville's going to be trying just as hard to get the first goal of the hockey game, but the Canucks have been terrific at doing it. And it has meant an awful lot to them. Didn't in this one, but it's been part of their secret sauce to get out in front, try to extend that lead, and then really dictate the way the games are played.
Yeah, it really is amazing, right? I mean, and it speaks a lot to coaching, because when you score first that frequently, it tells you that this team is ready to play, right? And so, as it always worked out later in games and things like that. And we've talked about, this late second period slumbers from time to time or what have you, but this team comes out generally on top of their game. And again, Rick Tocchet's been given a lot of credit for defensive structure and other parts of it, but having his team ready to go at the start matters. And it's going to matter as well when they get to the playoffs, where, games typically tend to be a little more low scoring, when there's much more in the way of emotional ebbs and flows. Teams are physical right out of the gates. The crowd is engaged and into it, right? And, we'll talk about this, but 9 years since there's been a home playoff game. If you don't think game 1 is going to be absolutely electric, and you also know that the Vancouver fan base is fatalistic, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you don't want to go down. You don't want to trail early in these games, because you'll feel that lack of energy from the crowd. But if you get up in these games, the crowd is going to be memorable, and it's everything these players are hoping for, because we've asked all of them in the last couple of days, imagine what it's going to be like. And all of them, their eyes get big, and they're excited. They're looking forward to it. There's big anticipation on the parts of the players, not just the fans. So if they can get off to an early start and keep the fans engaged, it'll be a great thing for this team.
Well, the stat that stands out is brought to you by Fountain Tire. And right now, Fountain Tire being on the road together means getting a great deal on tires. Save up to 25% on select tires, including Goodyear. That's up until April the 20th. Book your appointment at fountaintire.com. All right, let's turn our attention then to what is to come here for the Vancouver Canucks. And again, want to hear from you, your thoughts, predictions, whatever it is, as you start to size up the Nashville Predators. Hit us up on our interactive social channels at Rink Wide Van. You can talk to us in the YouTube live stream as well, in the chat there. It starts at home. You play all year to get home ice advantage. So we outlined the fact that the Canucks have a terrific record. You just mentioned the fact that the energy should be off the charts. A decade of pent-up emotion and energy for the Vancouver Canucks. Also interesting to me that it is a 7 o'clock Pacific time start. Like, for the Predators and their and maybe not the Predators. They're probably going to be here in a couple of days to adjust. But they're fans. Like, I thought the National Hockey League might throw them a bit of a bone with an earlier start Pacific time. There's a 2-hour time change, so it's going to be a 9 o'clock start in the Central time zone. on television. And we know that playoff hockey has the potential to go deep into the night and early into the morning as well. So I was a little surprised. Now, I get that Winnipeg, Colorado is the earlier game on Saturday for the networks, and TV plays a huge role in this, as you know, Farhan. But a 7 o'clock start, were you surprised at all that there?
Yeah, I thought they might even get an afternoon start, just, with the way the rest of the schedule is going to look. But look, it probably isn't the highest profile game as far as the U.S. networks are concerned. Nashville is not the most robust television market for NHL hockey, so they're probably less concerned about it. And, you can't really blame them for it. So from a Canucks standpoint, I would have loved to have seen it earlier. I'm loving the 4 p.m. games. I'm loving they had the 11th or the noon game, or can't remember how early it was, but fairly early against Anaheim a few weeks ago. So I was hoping that if it was going to start Sunday, it was going to be then. But they've also got the Sun Run going on around BC Place Stadium. So that's not going to be a fun time to navigate. So at least all of that will have come and gone. I'm sure that had nothing to do with scheduling in any of this as far as the TV networks are concerned. But it does turn out well for the Canucks and their fans to have a late start.
Great goaltending matchup, at least the potential of a great goaltending matchup with Thatcher Demko and UC Saros. Incredible stud defensemen on each side here in Quinn Hughes and Roman Josi. And then you look up front, and the Predators have a top line that has been lights out good, led by Philip Forsberg with 48 goals, third in the NHL in goals scored since the All-Star break. So he has been red hot of late. And on that line with Ryan O'Reilly, who has all kinds of experience and a Stanley Cup ring, and Gus Nyquist as well. But there is a drop after that in terms of the go-to guys for the Nashville Predators. Now, again, they've got top-end talent here. But I think on balance, when you look at these two lineups, at least on paper, the Canucks have to believe that they've got a sizable edge in terms of depth.
Yeah, I would agree. And they should feel that way about it, because especially the way the Canucks are currently constructed. And you have to believe that they were looking ahead to a possible matchup with Nashville, and that factored in to why Rick Tocchet made the decision he did with that third line, because you want balance. And the Canucks should have an advantage with lines 2 and 3 compared to what Nashville is going to put out there. And quite frankly, I think Vancouver's defense on the second and third pairs matches up better against Nashville as well, right? So if they can, who's going to be the matchup line? Is it going to be the JT Miller line, or is it going to be the Lindholm line? We know it's not going to be the Pettersson line, but one of those other two lines is going to get the matchup against that Forsberg-O'Reilly line. And can they match them to a saw-off? And if they can do that, you have to like the Canucks' chances at the other end of the ice. And as far as the goaltending is concerned, you're right. Both of these goaltenders should be even. I think Demko is better, but you look at UC Saros and how good he was when Nashville was on that 15-0-3 run, that 18-game stretch that put them back into this and in the driver's seat for a playoff spot, and then 4-5-1 in the last 10. And he's looked different in these last 10. So, which goaltender are you going to get, right? The Canucks went through this back in 2011 when Pekka Rinne was there. And, how are they going to solve him? You had a great goaltending matchup with Luongo, and the Canucks won that one. Ryan Kessler's not here to drive the bus. Bo Horvat's not here to drive the bus like he did against St. Louis a year ago, in the bubble, I should say. But JT Miller certainly has the ability to drive the bus. And but I think the Canucks have an edge in goal. I think they've got an edge in the back end, and I think they've got a sizable edge in terms of forward depth.
Yeah, look, Colton Sissons is the Predators' second-line center, and he's been a solid National Hockey Leaguer for a long time. He's a North Vancouver guy. And has given the Preds some great years of service, but he's their second line center. So
he should be your third line center, right? Like that's
where I say, like, the Canucks have to find a way to make that a mismatch, whether it's Elias Pettersson, whether it's Elias Lindholm taking on the top end toughs and freeing up Miller and Pettersson then and their lines, to take on guys lower in the lineup for the Nashville Predators. But that's where I think the Vancouver Canucks ought to have an edge. And then look, like, these are all legitimate National Hockey Leaguers, maybe not household names, but perhaps they'll become more so to Canuck fans as you build through a playoff series. But you're looking at guys like Luke Evangelista and Tommy Novak.
Anthony Beauvillier.
Anthony Beauvillier is coming back. Luke Shen is going to be part of this and probably a factor. Like, as physical as they come, and an honest player on the Preds. Jeremy Lauzon led the National Hockey League in hits as a defenseman here. So, if you want to tread into his corner, you're going to have to pay a price. So, I mean, the Preds can be a physical bunch, but again, if you can control and somehow contain particularly Forsberg, but that line and make some of those other guys that I mentioned beat you. I think that has to be the game plan for the Canucks. Now, Philip Forsberg is going to get his looks far, and I think he's 5th in the NHL in shots on goal. Like, this guy peppers goaltenders, and he's got an incredible shot and a great release, and he's feeling it coming into these playoffs. So it's not going to be an easy challenge to keep him in check, but that's the beauty of playoff hockey is the matchups. It's the in-game adjustments. It's the momentum swings from game to game, but even within the games themselves. And, there's also that unsung hero factor. And, we went through a season here where we wondered who the unsung hero of the Canucks was going to be because there were so many candidates. I think you kind of look at the playoffs the same way. Like, yeah, you expect the stars to show up and produce, but there's generally one or two guys that kind of, come out of the weeds and make a name for themselves. And so I'm fascinated to see who that might be on the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, I think for the Canucks, it's going to be Elias Lindholm. I think that his game is trending in that direction. He's in a position to succeed right now. And if he doesn't, if he gets those matchups, he could be in a position to succeed that way. And that's how we view his contribution in the series, that if he winds up getting that Forsberg line matchup and does a good job with it, that's going to be a huge factor for the Canucks. But if it's Miller that gets that matchup, then I think the line that Lindholm winds up with Joshua and Garland is going to be in a position to contribute offensively. And I just think that he's been quiet. It's been building up, and I think it's going to be there for him. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And, but for me, look, this series will come down to two things. And it's funny because both these teams are getting what they asked for, right? Like, if the Predators wanted the Canucks, and the Canucks, we believe, wanted the Predators, right? And as Kevin Bieksa tells us, everybody has a preference. So we know they didn't want to face the defending champs. We know they didn't want to face the 1-3-1 in Los Angeles. Now, the unfortunate part is you get a really good goalie that you've got to face, which is potentially better than the two you might have faced in Vegas and LA. But I think these are the things that both teams wanted. Now, you talked about how physical Nashville likes to play. Selected players like to play. It's going to lead to some penalties. So number one, power play has trended better in the last week and a half of the season. Can they build on that and wind up taking advantage? Because we've said for a while, when the power play was hemorrhaging, we had said this team is going nowhere in the playoffs if they don't fix it. It's gotten better. Can it be productive? Better's not good enough. And the second thing is going to be Pettersson, like it or not, because, between Miller and Lindholm, they're either going to do the matching up or they're going to get matched up. And I heard one of the other analysts in our city suggest that the bar is so high for Pettersson because he's making almost $12 million, and we're comparing him to his previous years. Pure nonsense. Bullshit. The bar for Elias Pettersson right now has gotten really low, where we see him get a couple of chances in a game and we start talking about how he's trending in the right direction. Like, the guy hasn't driven play since the All-Star break, but every once in a while when we notice him and he's skating well and selected things happen and he gets a couple chances and he's around the net here and there, we're like, okay, he's ready. That's how much we've lowered the bar on Pettersson. And he was good in the bubble, right? Like, he lived up to it as a very young player. And we look at all the Canuck young players, at the time, and really he and Hughes were the main ones, but even Miller, like, they all did their part. Pettersson did his part. Pettersson got matched up against in those series, and he did his part. But we know it's a completely different vibe when you don't have to feel the pressure of fans on top of you if you're not producing. So power play is one, Pettersson's the other. And for me, that's what this is going to come down to, because I believe the other elements on both rosters are going to do their part.
Well, if the power play is a factor, penalty killing the other side, Nashville 22nd in the National Hockey League on the penalty kill. So maybe that plays into the hands of the Vancouver Canucks. If they can get some calls, go to work with man advantage, and we'll see ultimately how it shakes down. Just checking in on some listener feedback here. Matt says, I'm an old man at 38 here. How many of you young whippersnappers even remember the Canucks' last quote-unquote real playoffs, not including the bubble? And yeah, it was interesting. I heard Brock Besser talking about it this week and some others who only have that bubble experience to draw on, and they don't really feel like they have played playoff hockey. And so, I'm sure there was some intensity in the games to take Vegas deep, and they knocked off the defending Stanley Cup champs, although the Blues didn't really look like they wanted to be inside that bubble all that much. But I think that's the right mindset. If these guys, they're kind of going into this with their eyes wide open, knowing that the environment, the energy, the hostile reaction of fans when they're on the road, like all of that is part of the true playoff experience. And in that regard, like they've all played at high levels. And Brock's played in the national championship game in the NCAA, and guys have played in the world championships, the world juniors, and those types of things. So you don't get to the NHL without having some big game experience, but these are the Stanley Cup playoffs. And it'll be interesting to see if there is any sort of adjustment period. There can't be a long one, certainly, if the Canucks are going to rely on some of these young guys to help lead the way.
What about how many media have playoff experience? We chuckled about this the other night at the game. So for people listening here, like how many people do you think is, Canucks media kind of gets all put together in this big, mass, right? That it's Canucks media, good, bad, or indifferent. Well, in terms of people who actually covered this team, regularly covered it. Now, we're not talking about guys that are in studios, okay? But people that actually come to games and talk to players on the regular. You know how many of us are there that covered this team in 2015? 6 of us.
Is that what we came to a conclusion with 6? Yeah.
Okay. IMAC, Kuzma, you and I, Kevin Woodley, Jay Janower. Right. In terms of guys that regularly come and report on this team, others have been around. I mean, Donnie and Dalton, like there's guys that have been around
for sure.
But in terms of guys that come to the arena, come to the locker room, come to games, in person to do this, there aren't very many of us. There's been a lot of turnover. So bring your playoff intensity, would you? You know what it's like in terms of the fans. But look, I think the Canucks are gonna. When I look at certain players, I think you're going to get the best of JT Miller, right? Because we've talked about his emotional volatility from time to time. He loves this. Like this, the intensity that comes with these types of games, his game is built for that. I think Hughes is he is the ice in his veins guy. Nothing phases this kid. I think he is going to be just fine. He is going to play the game at a high level like he always has. I look at guys like Tyler Myers and Nikita Zadorov. I think you're going to get the best of them. Now, the challenge with them is they're such big bodies that officials look at them. And if they get out of themselves, and Zadorov, that's just how he plays, right? He's the big hit master. But how are referees going to handle Zadorov? Myers, I think, gets unjustly called more than any other. He is the definition of 2 minutes for being too big. When you look at these guys, I think Garland's going to thrive in this. I think Joshua's going to thrive in this. Pettersson, if he does well early, I think he'll elevate. But I think if he struggles early, I think he'll feel the weight of that, right? But I do think that for the most part, I look at this team and I just think people talk about their experience. I think there's a time when sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and that's not a bad thing. And I don't think that the weight of all of this is going to get to these guys. They have been waiting so long for this. We've talked to Miller and Hughes, and you think of them as young players, or maybe not Miller because he's 30 now, but when you think of these guys, they've been here for 5 years, right? 4 or 5 years, and they've been through the struggles, right? And Miller had such a really good comment the other day about how it felt at times like this organization was just standing still. Everything was just at a standstill, right? And now all of a sudden they've had this breakthrough. This is what they've wanted for so long. I just believe we're going to get the best of this team.
I want to get to a few more comments here in the inbox. Dan was hoping that Hoggy was going to get to 25. Comes up short, but still 24-goal season for Nils Höglander. Pods is going to flip the switch come playoff time. We'll see about that. Short leash because they've got a veteran like PDG, Nils Amon, who wants to play as well, and they'll probably be the extras. So a little bit of pressure. It's all relative. But,
Pods is going to score. Listen, here's my call.
Score?
Game one,
okay.
Game one, either Mikheyev or Podkolzin is going to score a goal.
Wow.
Game all one. Right. Okay, now I'm not. I should be more definitive and take one of them. But game one, you're going to get a Podkolzin or a Mikheyev goal. Write it down. Save the receipt.
Making notes here. Matt says, totally agree with Farhan. Miller, the fiery extrovert, lives for the playoffs, as does teacher's pet Garland. Hopefully the other Canucks follow them into battle. And then let's leave it with this one. Canucks in 4. Well, we'll see about that for a prediction.
Wow. I'm not going there.
He says it's weird that we're talking about all sorts of guys stepping up, except Petey. And It is. I mean, we're expecting all the other guys that are built for playoff hockey, and yet the jury is going to be out and the pressure is going to be on, the spotlight as well. And look, I mean, I think that's part of the real intrigue for me, Farhan, is what does Elias Pettersson look like when the puck drops on Sunday night?
Well, like I said, I think here's the thing. I think he's going to have every opportunity, right? And, he's playing with Nils Hoglander, who's the Energizer Bunny. He's got some speed with Mikheyev on his other wing. Like, I just think it's time for Petey to want the puck on his stick. It's time for him to skate and drive play. Even if he doesn't score, when he plays with the level of confidence required to drive play, it's going to make everybody around him better. And look, I just want to go back for me to the bubble and his only previous playoff experience. It's a different experience, but all I can draw on is that to say, I think he'll be there. I think he'll be ready. And again, he's not going to be asked to match up, and he won't get the matchup. Okay. Because if you're a team and you've got a shutdown line or a shutdown pairing, you're going to put it on JT Miller. And from a Canucks standpoint, it's either the Lindholm line or the Miller line that's going to be tasked with matching up. It's not going to be Pettersson. So those opportunities are going to be there. And look, I'm not going to say he can't play any worse, because I don't want to suggest he's played that poorly, right? Like it's not like that. But I do think the next step for him is forward, and I think he's going to take it.
Thanks to everybody for your contributions. So we'll continue to work them in here as we go, starting into the playoffs on Sunday night. The Great Clips chat line, a presentation of Great Clips. More than 4,400 hair salons throughout the United States and Canada. Great Clips, the world's largest hair salon brand, an official hair salon of the NHL. For more information, check them out online, greatclips.com. Great Clips, it's going to be great. And we ask you for submissions all the time in our Great Clips chat line. Let us know where in the world you are checking out Rink Wide Vancouver. And we've had all sorts of fun as we've gone through these bunch of shows, as we've moved into the video realm, and it's all ramping up for the playoffs. So we want to keep that coming. So hit us up on social at Rink Wide Van or any of our feedback channels. We want to know where in the world Canuck fans are located, where you're checking out the games. We always ask, what time is puck drop locally for you for a standard 7 o'clock home game at Rogers Arena? All right, so we bring up our Rink Wide worldwide map, and as you can see, there's only one place on it tonight. There's a bunch of pins from people that have checked in from around the planet on earlier programs. But the reason that we have highlighted Nashville, Tennessee, and I don't know if we have any viewers, I hope we do, or listeners in Music City, USA, but I'm here to tell you tonight that Rink Wide Vancouver will originate from Bridgestone Arena after both games 3 and 4 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Nation Network stepping up in a huge way to support us and bring you the best local content possible. Everybody's ramping up for playoffs, and we're doing it here at Rink Wide Vancouver as well. So my bags are packed, the tickets are booked, the hotel, the whole bit. Farhan, I'm heading out on the road again, and really looking forward to it, to experience playoff hockey.
Anyone coming with you, or is the co-host back here?
Irf will be here in studio holding down the fort, but we're going to set up at Bridgestone and bring you all that we do, the post-game reaction. We'll have a chance to work the locker rooms quickly and then head on up and bring it on. And also there to provide coverage for Canucks Army game days and between games as well. So it's great that our bosses of the Nation Network have stepped up in a big way, fully on board. They want us to deliver the best content possible, and so we are taking the show on the road. Super excited about that, and so we'll be there whenever that series moves to Nashville. There's talk that there's going to be an extra day between games 2 and 3.
No, I think 3 and 4. Or is it 2 and 3?
Again, there's uncertainty about the schedule, but whenever games 3 and 4 are, we will be there coming to you live from Bridgestone, and the off days as well, covering it for Canucks Army. So, really looking forward to that. And Bridgestone Arena can be a fun place to watch hockey, and obviously Nashville, a fun place to spend some time. And we'll see if the Canucks enjoy their brief stay there. They don't want any part of going back for a game 6, but they had to back in 2011. That's where they actually eliminated the Nashville Predators, the series that Ryan Kessler was an absolute beast. And we'll see who steps up for the Vancouver Canucks as we get set here to start the playoffs again. Game 1, this much we know, starts at 7 o'clock on Sunday at Rogers arena. I mentioned Canucks Army. Continue to check out all the great content there. David Quadrelli's got an instant reaction to this game, but there's a lot of playoff preview material from all the talented writers and contributors. So if you haven't checked out Canucks Army, add that to your website lists ahead of the playoffs here. And of course, Matt and Blake will be all over the playoff matchup on Sakaris and Price. And you got Canucks Convo as well. So a whole bunch of content providers under the Nation Network tent. And that includes us here at Rink Wide Vancouver. It's been great having you as part of this, Farhan. I know that you're going to have playoff duties yourself. So we may find some way to squeeze you back into the occasional podcast. I think we'll be doing some off-day podcasting as well. So maybe that's an opportunity to get you and your thoughts back on our program. But you've been a great contributor. It's been a ton of fun. And thank you so much for spending a little bit more time with us here after this one and helping us set up the Canucks and the Predators.
Dude, I can't believe that it took 9 years for us to get back to this. So I am all in, my friend.
Well, there you go. Farhan Lalji stopping by and providing his thoughts and analysis after a 4-2 loss for the Canucks in Winnipeg, game 82. The regular season is over. Full speed to the playoffs. For the guys working behind the scenes, Mike and Liam, Jacob as well. For Farhan, this is Jeff Paterson again. Thanks so much for checking us out here on Rink Wide Vancouver, a presentation of the Applewood Auto Group.